Good afternoon and welcome to the Overcoming Imposter Syndrome webinar. My name is Kirsten Harrison and I'm the Program Coordination Manager for SACAP, and I will be your host and your speaker for this afternoon. I'm an HPCSA-registered counsellor and Program Coordination Manager at the South African College of Applied Psychology. Over here in my role, I oversee the academic operations for SACAP's postgraduate and professional training programs across South Africa. In the 10 years since graduating, I've built a career at the intersection of higher education, student development, and mental health support. Alongside my professional role, I'm completing a Master's of Arts in Psychology with research exploring the relationship between perceived stress, coping, and quality of life amongst adults in South Africa during the COVID-19 pandemic. I also run a private counselling practice with a focus on mental health care, substance use, and disaster relief support. Thank you to everyone that has popped a message in the chat. It is lovely to have you here, and we have an awesome group with us. Let's kick off today with a reflection. In a moment, a poll will pop up onto your screen, and I want you to take a moment to answer the question for us. The question we're looking at first and foremost is, have you ever felt like a fraud despite evidence that you are capable? Take a moment, make your choice. Let's see where everyone's at today. All right, let's have a look at what our results are looking like. So first and foremost, most people, 49% of the call today have chosen sometimes. Then we have frequently with 39%, and then going down to 7% for rarely, and a 4% for never. I think the most important thing for us to look at here is that whatever your answer was, I'm really happy that you're here. Let's talk about this together. I think this poll also shows us that this experience may be a lot more common than we may be thinking. All right. So one of the most important things I want you to take away from today is that if you've ever felt like that, if you've ever felt like a fraud, an imposter, if you've ever felt like you don't belong or that you aren't capable, I want you to know that you're not alone, not even close. And I'm hoping that there can be some comfort in that while we go through the webinar today. So research actually suggests that up to 70% of people experience what we call imposter feelings at some point in their life. This includes people at the top of their fields. Imposter syndrome does not discriminate. So here we can look at surgeons, professors, executives, even creatives, counselors. The job title does not protect you from this. This is a shared human experience that we go through. It doesn't just show up in one kind of setting. I think you may feel it in an academic environment if you are surrounded by people that you perceive know a lot more than you. You may feel it if you step into a new professional role and you wonder if you truly are meant to be there, and reflecting on how you got there. I think that's something that happens to us a lot of the time, is kind of thinking of the journey that got us to where we are. And I think these feelings can even surface in people that have never experienced it before, right? It can be something that you tackle somewhere alongside your career. I think what's important here is that it's not something that is only affecting people at the beginning of their career or their professional journeys, their studies, whatever it may be, their first job. That's not only what we're talking about today. I also want you guys to think about how these feelings can come up over time. And often it's actually once you have succeeded, once you have achieved quite a lot in your life, that's often where we see some of these self-doubt feelings coming in, which is actually quite challenging. So we're going to unpack a little bit about why that is the case. But something that's so crucial and something that ties into our poll as well is just how common this experience is. And I think it's really important that we highlight that, because shame and silence are two of the things that keep imposter feelings going. When we think we are the only ones that are feeling this way, it reinforces the very belief that we're trying to change. This is something that I think, because of shame, because sometimes of embarrassment, because of feeling inadequate. This is something that we usually keep to ourselves, and it can actually be surprising to know who you might know in your own life that has experienced this. It's something that we usually keep to ourselves, and I think that there is something important with that, because we shouldn't have to struggle alone. We shouldn't have to go through these things alone. And what we're talking about today is how this is our shared human experience. It's something that is there. It is something that we can all be susceptible to facing at some point in our space. So you'll see on the slide that we mentioned imposter syndrome. We also mentioned imposter phenomenon. And what I want to say here is that this is a concept that has changed over years. So originally, where this term was coined was in the 1970s, and it was two researchers that were looking into trends of highly successful women, so women that are achieving really well, and the sort of connection and association with that to these self-doubt feelings, and these women not trusting their own abilities, struggling with confidence, struggling to own their achievements, struggling to see that they are the ones that actually got them to where they are, and that it's not just a fluke or a mistake. You didn't just slip through the cracks somewhere, right? And that's originally where this research really began. And over time, researchers have shown us that this is something that affects everyone, regardless of gender, regardless of race, culture, background, regardless of sort of job sector as well, just to say, is that it's something that can really be there. But there are four main concepts that fall within this imposter phenomenon, which I think is important for us to unpack, to really holistically see what we're talking about. And the first one is the persistent self-doubt. So what this can feel like is constantly feeling like you are inadequate or less adequate than those around you. So there's a lot of comparing that happens there, but the self-doubt it's that inside voice that says, actually, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can handle this. How could I be able to do this? And with those questionings, there's no real foundation for the self-confidence to build on, because it feels shaky. The foundation feels shaky. The second thing I want to mention there is difficulty internalizing achievements. So if you've ever found yourself attributing your success to external factors and struggling to see that it was your actions that got you to where you are, I think we can become experts of convincing ourselves of the opposite. We can become experts of telling ourselves what a fluke it was, or what a chance, it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. That's why we got this position. That's why we were accepted into this program. That's why we did well at that webinar, is because it was just the timing. It was an easy topic. It was just the audience was easy, right? When we start discrediting things like that, where is the room to actually internalize it, to say, hey, I really did a good job there, or I'm actually proud of myself for what I was able to do. That dialogue doesn't happen at all, because the success doesn't really feel like success anymore. It feels tainted almost, and it doesn't get internalized as an achievement. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that cycle looks like in a moment as well. But that's a big contributor there. Something that is quite prominent with imposter syndrome is a fear of being exposed as inadequate. So this feeling of, I got through it this time, next time I might not be as lucky, or I was able to convince everyone that I felt in control and confident this time. I don't know how I'm going to do it next time. So it's almost like having these fears about being exposed, and you're trying to kind of hide those feelings. So it makes sense then that people aren't really speaking openly about this, because do we have that safety? You know, in a lot of spaces, we don't have that psychological safety to say, hey, I actually don't know what's going on here, or I feel like I'm at, you know, the bottom of a pond and I'm struggling. It doesn't feel like in a lot of environments there's that safety to do so. So it's just kept internal. It's just kept there. And like I said, I think we can be surprised if we think about some people in our lives. You might look at someone and think, sure, they have it all put together. They really do have it put together. Look how confident they are. Look how well prepared they are. They're just doing fantastic. And with that, it automatically makes us feel less than adequate because we're not actually looking at what our achievements are. We're actually comparing ourselves to something completely different. But it's rooted in this fear of being exposed. Like, I need to over prepare. I need to make sure I do double the amount of work so that I can almost cover up that I don't feel as confident in this topic, opposed to actually just saying, like, I'm not proficient or I need some help here. It's those ones that seem small, but there can be a reluctance to even say that, to even feel comfortable to share that. And then I did touch a little bit about, kind of attributing the success to external factors, and that maybe it was a very lenient panel, and that's why you got into that program, or, you know, the person that conducted your interview for a job was just really friendly and really nice to talk to, and that's maybe why they chose you for the job. In that, I mean, it sounds like something quite simple, face value. It seems like something reasonable, something plausible to say. But actually, what happened to all your work that you put in to actually get that interview? What about that? What about the preparation? What about your portfolio that you have that is sitting behind you? That's, I think, what makes imposter syndrome so unique, is that even in the face of facts, even in the face of factual information, when you're experiencing imposter syndrome, you're unable to actually see through it. So even though the information may be there in black and white telling you, hey, you got accepted into this program, you got to, you know, we're offering you a role, we're offering you this job role specifically, even though the evidence is there that you're achieving. Internally, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like it's constantly just a push to the next thing, to the next thing. Right. So in talking about what imposter syndrome is, we also have to talk about what it is not. And an important consideration that I do want to make here is that imposter syndrome is not a mental health disorder. It is not in the DSM. It's not something that can be diagnosed. And so it is not a mental health condition, right? It's a shared human experience. And I think a mistake that we can make is pathologizing that. If we're pathologizing that experience, we take away from what it actually is. And it's not a mental health condition or a diagnosis or a disorder. There is no pathology that is associated there. I want to pause there for a moment because I think that's something important. Let that land a little bit, that it can feel like it is something that is so all-encompassing that how can it not be considered this? But I think when we look at it, it makes sense. It's a pattern of thinking. It's a pattern of feeling. It's a human experience that we have. Something that imposter syndrome is also not is proof that someone is incompetent. Just because someone is feeling that way doesn't mean that there's always factual reasons why. And I think that's something we need to think about when we experience this, because you may be sitting here thinking maybe you haven't experienced it, but you're working with someone that is like that, or you've picked up that there's feelings, you know, maybe one of your team members has a feeling like that, or just someone else that you know. And I think that's where the stigma comes in as well, is that just because you're feeling like that, it doesn't mean that it's the truth. And if someone is feeling like that, they should feel like they're able to communicate that, they're able to say that, and it shouldn't take away from their credibility. I think that's where the fear is. I think that's where a lot of the shame is if I put my hand up and I say, I don't know what's going on, are people going to dismiss me? Are they going to make the assumption that I am then just incompetent? So there's a lot of fear that's there. Also, a sign of weakness. Experiencing this does not mean that you are not adequate and that you aren't able to do the task or the job or the program or whatever it is that you're trying to do. It's not a sign of weakness. Often it's just highlighting that we're in that gap between what we know, so like what we proficient in and what we know, and that little growth gap that's there. That's where we kind of step a little bit out of the comfort zone and we're trying something that's unfamiliar. We can't be confusing, I guess, feelings of, let's say, being apprehensive about tackling something because we've never done it before, and feeling apprehensive about tackling something because we don't feel like we can do it. Those are two different things. And I think sometimes we put them together and it's sort of, I'm feeling apprehensive because I've never done this before, and that means I can't do it. But you're feeling apprehensive because you haven't done it before. You don't have experience in that. So the brain doesn't have something to previously rely on. And I think that's where it's so important to go into that little gap between I'm proficient in all of these things, but there's this gap here where there's a growth that's needed. And often I think we can dismiss ourselves to be like, this is making me nervous. I don't think I can do it. That must mean I'm not capable of doing it. No, nervousness is there for a reason. I think it just shows us that we're taking on something that's different, that's new, and sometimes it can be challenging. So I think just to reflect for yourself as well, to think about that. If you often dismiss your own apprehensive feelings, your own nervousness and anxiety of, it means I can't do it, opposed to, hey, this is new. I'm doing it for the first time, actually. I think what our poll also showed is that, I mean, even with those that are in the call today, this is not a unique experience to a small group of people. There's a lot of us here today, and there's a lot of us that are having shared experiences about this. And I hope that that is reassuring. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the competence paradox. What is crucial here is that often when we are tackling something, we can feel like we are in and out of our depths. We don't even know where we are, right? But as your knowledge grows, so does your awareness of what you don't know. And why that's important is that it's actually that the more you research something or the more work you do to understand something, the more you realize there is to learn. So that kind of view and that scope opens so much that naturally you're going to feel like you don't know a lot of it. And that's where it can become really difficult, because you can be sitting there feeling like, but I feel like, I'm understanding this. I'm trying to learn this, I'm practicing, I'm trying to get there. But the truth is, you don't know what you don't know when you first start. And there's an innocence to that. You might even feel confident, enthusiastic, a lot of kind of feelings that go with that. And I think as you kind of grow, your understanding deepens in a field or in a topic or in a job even. The horizon is what expands, and you see all the nuances that you missed before, all the questions now that you can't answer, different to the ones that you couldn't answer in the beginning, but it can feel a bit overwhelming. It can feel that the more I learn, the more I have to learn. And that can feel disproportionate. It feels like what I'm learning and what I still have to learn are not the same, and I'm not making progress. I think it can feel like that too. It can feel like your confidence is going backwards at the same time that your competence is growing, if that makes sense. And in that experience, often capable people start questioning themselves. They compare the depths of their self-knowledge, so like including all of the doubts, the mistakes, the gaps. They're comparing that to the polished external presentation of others. And that comparison doesn't feel fair. In the moment, it seems like it's fair. I think when our minds are kind of telling us this, and when you're in that space. But I mean, let's look at that. I think it isn't unfair, and that's where it is unfair. And that's where it sort of brings us to the paradox that I was talking about, where the more competent you become, the more aware you are of your own limitations, and the easier it becomes to mistake that awareness for inadequacy. So those things just become the same thing. And if we're not reflecting and thinking about it and asking ourselves those questions of, why am I specifically feeling like this about that event? What is it about me that is being triggered here? What is it that is lying there? Without that even quick reflection, check in with yourself, it is very easy to believe that it's inadequacy and that you're just not getting anywhere, and that becomes a self-fulfilling belief in some spaces. So that space of growth I was talking about is uncomfortable, but feeling uncertain is not a sign that you're in the wrong place. It might be a sign that you're in the right one, because you're being challenged, because it's new, because it's different. And that's where that reflection is also crucial, so that you know what's going on for you individually. I want to take a moment and do another poll for us quickly to see what are the contributors to your imposter feeling. So everyone that's on the call, if you can take a moment to just choose what you relate to the most in terms of what contributes most to your personal imposter feelings. I'm interested to see what the distribution looks like. And then I want to talk a little bit about what each of these look like, and how they can be quite harmful, even unintentionally. I don't think we intentionally go out to cause ourselves harm, but some of these thought patterns, some of these ways of thinking can be end up being a little bit more harmful. Very interesting. It seems like our group is very much split between all, which is completely understandable. I think all of these factors have a role to play. And whatever one you selected here, I want to invite you to reflect on that after this webinar, to think about, what patterns am I doing that are possibly contributing to my own feelings like this? Are there things that I'm saying to myself? Are there things that I'm doing? Are there things that I'm saying to others that are actually reinforcing these feelings here? Because sometimes imposter phenomenon or syndrome, it can feel like it's something that is just happening to you, like you have no control over it. It's just these feelings that come up and they bombard and they're overwhelming. But I hope with this, we're kind of seeing what's contributing to it. And sometimes these thought patterns, these behaviors really have a bigger impact than we may think about. One of the most important things I think about often is self-talk. If you are constantly bashing yourself with a baseball bat, a metaphorical baseball bat, you're bashing your self-esteem, how do you expect to have that self-esteem build so that it can be resilient and it doesn't get, I guess, beaten by other people's baseball bats? It's how do we actually hold that ground for ourselves and feel confident and feel like we can trust ourselves in that space? So let's have a look at these in a little bit more detail. I think perfectionism, and you can also let me know in the chat, which one you relate to, if you feel comfortable with doing that. If anyone wants to engage like that, you're welcome to. But I think all of these we can, just on face value, you can see how all of these play a different role. But it depends on who you are as a person, how you internalize this, or which one of these contributes the most to your imposter feelings. I think perfectionism is at the top of the list because I think it's one of the biggest contributors. I think when your internal standard is flawless, right? So anything less than perfect feels like failure, or even worse, exposure, because that in this space can feel worse then failure is exposure, that sort of anxiety of being exposed as a fraud, that someone's going to expose you for not knowing as much. So the perfectionist doesn't say, I did this well. They say, I nearly got found out, but I managed to hide it this time. Or I tried really hard and I just got through. Like I just got through. Next time I have to try even harder to be able to do this. And that standard that we're talking about is a standard that you are setting individually. You're setting that for you. And once we realize that we're in charge of that, we're in charge of those systems and frameworks. Once we realize that we can take control of the narrative a little bit and we can start thinking about how we're talking about ourselves, how we're talking to ourselves. And sometimes it has nothing to do with other people. Sometimes it is literally, it's that voice that is saying, you need to do better. You need to do more. You didn't prepare hard enough. And it's just a constant voice that's there. Comparison with others, I think we compare our internal experience. So the imposter voice that I'm talking about, that's sort of there all the time, the anxiety, the uncertainty. We compare that to others' perfect or seemingly perfect external representation. We don't know what's really going on. We don't know how they're feeling. We don't know what their, self-talk conversations are going like, but the external presentation looks confident, looks great, looks prepared. And it's an unfair comparison, right? If we think about that, we do it constantly, but it's like taking what feels messy inside you and comparing it to the final draft of someone else's work. It doesn't seem fair. And it doesn't seem like we're even comparing the same things. But in those moments, it can feel like it. It can feel that we are comparing it. A fear of failure is a big one. I think this is something that's inherent in a lot of people because tied into the perfectionism and also just tied into your own motivations for success, your own understanding of what success and achievement looks like, and what you deem as an achievement, what you deem as being successful. Those are such crucial things to understand because we don't see it the same way. Like, for example, I'll take this webinar for an example. Let's say, for me, maybe, I can compare to other people that I've seen that look more confident, and I can feel like they don't understand what it's like to be nervous and to be anxious. The fear of failing can also stop you from even trying. There's almost like this paralysis that can happen sometimes where I'm so afraid of not doing a good job that I'm not even going to try because I can't. I feel like I can't even do it. And being in that space is not easy. And I want to recognize that because you feel stuck and it feels like it's almost like a learned helplessness. It's like you can feel stuck in that moment that there's nothing that you can do that can make this difference. And that's why I want to talk a little bit about what we can actually do. Like, what are some of the things that we can actually do? But just to chat here as well about the need for external validation. So when we aren't as sort of, let's say, confident in our own abilities and we don't have that self-trust in our abilities, we can be looking to others for that validation. Like, I need to, get that feedback from my boss to know that I'm on the right track, or I need to understand how I'm achieving alongside others. And I want to hear that from others. And I think that's important. That's one part of feedback. That's one part of sort of validation. It is very important, but it's not everything. Because if my sense of achievement is based on how other people perceive what I'm doing, I'm not in control of that at all. That person can be having a bad day and think I did a bad job, and then that's just it. Am I going to believe that? Am I going to internalize that is my ability? Like, that is, maybe I'm incompetent then too. Entering into new roles and new environments. So something brand new. And I think, just to say, all of us here have done firsts. You've done a first day somewhere. It could have been school. It can be a first day at the job. It can be studying. We've all navigated firsts here. So there has been a lot of newness just in navigating life, right? But in the beginning, something like that can also trigger these feelings because novelty, something that's new, involves not knowing everything about it, right? So I think what we need to acknowledge is that that's supposed to actually happen. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't belong or that there isn't space for you there. It just means that it's new. And like we were saying earlier, you don't know what you don't know yet, which can be actually what the anxiety is about, is like, I'm navigating this. I don't even know what the challenges are yet. I don't even know what to prepare for that can possibly be a problem. But just like that, we focus a lot on the negatives, but just like that, we should be saying, this is a new opportunity. I wonder what my achievements could look like here. This is an amazing opportunity. I wonder what I can do here. I wonder what impact I can have in this space. We don't really think about those things. It's more, am I going to be able to fit in? Am I going to be able to know as much as what I think everyone around me sort of knows? So none of these factors make anyone weak or incapable or inadequate. They're often signs of someone taking their work seriously. The question is how we work with it. And rather than it's about learning to understand and live alongside these feelings opposed to getting rid of them. And that might be just like a pulling off a band-aid there for anyone on the webinar that was hoping for a quick fix, a step-by-step guide on how we can navigate that. I guess I'm here to say that it's also a process that starts with the awareness too. But something that I thought would be helpful for us to actually understand and go through is this imposter cycle. And I think this is where we're able to sort of see the persistence of the self-doubt and the feeling. So it's never just a once-off thing, like a situation-specific thing. People that experience imposter syndrome experience these feelings for most things that they do. And it kind of goes into the cycle, starting off with the self-doubt. So for example, it's a new challenge. Let's say it's a new task or a new challenge. The questions immediately come up from the self-doubts. I'm not sure I can do this. What if I fail? What if they realize I don't know as much as I said I could do in my interview, maybe. I think sometimes we experience that. Or, when I said that I can handle pressure and stress and things like that, can I really? We start thinking about that. Are they going to realize it? Am I going to expose myself? Am I going to be able to talk my way out of this one? So it's not even about the task anymore. It's about, you haven't even started the thing yet. You haven't even given yourself a chance, but you're already saying like, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to navigate this? Then often what can happen here is that the person over prepares or under prepares. So self-doubt can lead to over preparing, like obsessive. I need to rehearse over and over and over again. I need to make sure I get this right. I need to keep on improving, which I think it can be, helpful. Preparing is helpful, but over preparing is obsessive. It's endless. And there's checking and rechecking, and the anxiety around that can sometimes make you even less prepared for the actual thing you need to do. And so when you get to the actual task, it's a lot more challenging to even do it, even though you've over prepared, but you're probably exhausted. You're probably a bit burnt out from that. And that's just the internal process. Again, we haven't even tackled really the thing yet. So the opposite of the over preparing would be procrastination. And that can be where you're more paralyzed by the fear of not being good enough. So it's not that I just don't want to start because I don't think it's important or because I'm lazy, perhaps. It's actually, I have an inability, to get going. There's an avoidance there. And it can feel legit, and it can feel, even to yourself, you can convince yourself that that's, the way that it is. But at its core, it's an avoidance. Because if I don't if I don't do anything, I can't be criticized on it. So it's like if I don't put my name in the hat, it's better. I don't have to participate in that. So we can see the over prepare, the overworking that happens, plus exhaustion. And I'm talking about physical exhaustion, but also mental, emotional, psychological exhaustion there. And then going to success, because more often than not, the event or the task gets done. And often it goes really well. There is a success in it, right? But here's the critical turning point. Instead of receiving that success as evidence of competence, the person can discount it. And if they over-prepare, they can say, well, of course that went well. Anyone could have managed that with the amount of preparation that I did. It was just the preparation. It's because I did that. That's why it went well, right? And if they procrastinated, it can be something like, I just got lucky. I pulled it off this time, and it's just because I crammed it, and it's just by luck that I managed to get it through. So then what happens? We discount the success, and it brings us right back to self-doubt. So think a little bit about this cycle as well, and think about it in terms of yourself and where you find yourself. Can you relate to it? Is it something that you see yourself doing? And if so, with that awareness, is there a possibility of interrupting the cycle? I want you to think about that just in the back of your mind as well. So here, yeah, this is the trap of success, where I just got lucky. Anyone could have done that. The standards weren't that high. They overestimated me. I'm sure there's tons. The test was easy. The interview was easy. The person was nice. I must have just slipped through. It's almost like there's an overflow of these types of justifications and explanations, but none of these are actually real, because it's actually us, just trying to assign meaning to what has happened. And I guess that's where it also shows us that there's a space that we can intervene and change. So like the self-talk cycles and the way that you engage with yourself, the thoughts that you have, it's important to be curious about those, because that's the space where we can change stuff. It has to start with the awareness. So we almost need to know what we're struggling with. We have to understand it. And sometimes that means facing it and thinking about it. And that can be hard. So I also just want to say that it's also not an easy process. It comes with a lot of emotions. There's a lot of people that have gone through a lot of difficult things. Sometimes getting stuck into this can bring out that as well. So it's almost like, even though you have the imposter, let's say, feelings to one specific event, we also need to look at, where does this actually come from? Is it really just this one specific event or one specific task? Or is this a way that you approach anything that has to do with your own ability? Is that how you approach it? And that can give you a good starting point of, how am I speaking to myself about these things? And how can I change that? Let's go on to the next slide. So we've spoken a lot about it being a internal process, right? We've spoken a lot about these feelings being sort of thought patterns, also feelings that are associated with that. But an important distinction that I do want to make here is that the environment that the person is in also matters significantly, because we can't reduce imposter syndrome to a personal failing that individuals need to fix on their own, right? The environment matters, and some environments are more likely to produce imposter feelings than others. Workplace culture, it plays a significant role. So environments that punish mistakes, that prioritize hierarchy, status, celebrate only specific or some achievements or exceptional performance. These environments can breed self-doubt. There's psychological safety that plays a role here. And what I mean by psychological safety is that the sense that you can ask questions, admit uncertainty, and make mistakes without fear of exclusion, without fear of humiliation or embarrassment. that psychological safety is crucial. And we can understand that in an environment where maybe there is not, the psychological safety hasn't been created, you can see how it can be easy to fall into that cycle, because the environment actually perpetuates it, if you think about it. So another aspect we need to look at is representation and inclusion. So if you look around and you don't see many people who look like you, share your background, don't speak your language, they don't sound like you, they don't come from your community, sometimes the message that gets sent or internalized there is that people like you don't usually belong in spaces like this, right? And that message is not just uncomfortable, it's damaging to your own sense of identity, your own understanding of your role and yourself. When we aren't able to sort of feel that we're represented or that we're included and that we're important, it's very difficult to feel like you can do something. So we've spoken a lot about it being an individual, with the individual, but I think it's so crucial to understand that environments can really, really contribute to this. And trying to support someone, that may be feeling these feelings, it's important to be realistic about the environment. A person can change their self-talk, but if they're going into a space where they feel excluded, where they don't feel like they have a space, where they don't feel like they are valued, how are they ever going to change that self-talk? Because you're almost bombarded by these external messages that it's not true. So I think let's move on to the next slide. I want to offer you some practical reframing, right? And a big disclaimer here. This is not toxic positivity. This is not us pretending that self-doubt is not there. I want to make a big distinction about that, because we're not ignoring or covering up or exclude or sort of erasing that these things are happening. I think it's just important for us to think about how we articulate it, even to ourselves, and the difference that can make in terms of us internalizing what's going on, and also just the emotional part of the process too. I mean, it takes its toll if you constantly having these thoughts. I feel like a fraud. I should know everything. I should be better. I don't belong. I shouldn't be here. If you're constantly having that, some small changes in that narrative can help. It can actually help contain you, and it can help you see things a little bit differently, not as sort of as much, let's say, tunnel vision that I feel like a fraud. I am a fraud. I'm doing something that stretches me. It's acknowledging that. I've never done this before, right? So I'm stretched. But does that mean I'm a fraud? Am I pretending? Not necessarily. I've just never done it before. Then I should know everything. I'm still learning, right? I think that's even just that in itself, it almost takes the pressure off of it, that I should know everything, to I'm still learning. It's a process. It's ongoing. Then I don't belong. I'm still finding my footing. So there's something about being more gentle. There's something about being more compassionate with yourself when you're going through this. And that's where the starting point has to be, is about how you are understanding this and how you are speaking to yourself as well. I think based on everything that we have been speaking about, I want to make a distinction between confidence and self-trust, because they're not the same thing, okay? They're definitely not the same thing. And confidence says, I know I can do this. It says, I know I can do this. And it's based on prior experience, familiarity, and by its very nature, it can't exist in new situations because you haven't done the new thing yet. So if you're sitting there, you're like, telling someone, you just need to be more confident. You just need to build your confidence about this. It'll be easier. How do you build your confidence if you haven't done the thing yet? You can't. Confidence is based on our ability. Confidence is how we evaluate our performance in certain things as well. So we can't tell, if we're telling people to just have more confidence or develop more confidence and it'll get easier. It won't, though. I think we can admit that it's not going to, because it doesn't address what the real challenge is. And the real challenge is the self-doubt. So that's where I want to bring in the self-trust, because self-trust is different. It says, I can handle whatever happens. It doesn't require you to have experience with doing that exact thing before. It draws on your track record of having navigated difficult things before. You've done the hard things, right? So self-trust is being able to say, I've successfully navigated all the hard days that I've had so far. I've been able to do that. I trust that I will be able to make the best decision when I get there. It's not just saying, I can do this. Because I think that's where that toxic positivity can come into, where it's like, fake it till you make it, where sometimes that can be helpful, sometimes it can be harmful, because if I'm faking it till I make it, what happens in that process? It can be really, really difficult. Whereas self-trust is going off of things you have experienced before. And it's saying that no matter what comes across my path, I trust that I'll have the skills to be able to navigate it at that time. Not saying I have to know everything. And I think another distinction here is that confidence can fluctuate. But self-trust, once you actually build it, it's a little bit more durable. It's something that you can deliberately develop. And with that, once you've got the self-trust, your confidence will naturally develop in the tasks and in the things that you're doing. But we need to start with the trust that I can do this. It might be hard, it might be new, it might be different, it might be scary, but I can do this and I can handle it. And that's the crucial moment that's there. So this is a reflection question, and I wanted this to be something that you think about and something that you maybe take away from this webinar today. And it's something to think about personally. What evidence do you have that you are more capable than what your inner critic suggests? You don't have to feel pressured to share now. If you want to, please pop it into the chat. I'm really loving the comments coming through in the chat, guys. Thank you so much for engaging. If you want to let us know in the chat. But I think that this can be a good reflection point for you to think about, because there is something there. I promise you. You may not see it first and foremost, but think about it. It's there. And it can be interesting to go through that process, because it helps you see what are your own blocks. What is your imposter voice saying, and how is it trying to discount the things that you're saying? That's something that's crucial. But I think just some of the key takeaways from our talk today is that the imposter feelings are common. This is something that we are experiencing. It's a shared human experience. It's not a diagnosis. It's not pathology at all. It's a thinking and feeling pattern that's there. These feelings can come up during these periods of growth and change. When we're growing, it means we're doing things that stretch us, right? So that's in its very definition, growth. And then we spoke a little bit about success and how that automatically doesn't remove the self-doubt, because that is the challenge with imposter syndrome, is that it's so nuanced that despite having evidence, we can still question it. It still doesn't feel as legit as it should. And then, the environment, we need to think about that. So thinking about yourself and thinking about the environments that you find yourself in. Do you feel psychologically safe in them? Are you creating psychological safety with the environments that you influence? Also, something for us to all think about. I think we have our own spaces, and I guess the goal is, it's not about removing these feelings. It's not about taking them away. It's really about learning to move forward despite that. It's about learning to live alongside these feelings, to understand them. We can't cut them off. That's usually when it becomes challenging, is when we try to cut them off and we try to pretend that they're not there. I promise you, these types of feelings, if you try and ignore them, picture it like a toddler, for example, that's trying to get someone's attention. If that toddler pulls kind of on your leg, tries to get your attention, and you tell the toddler, like, not now, not now, I'm busy, chances are it's going to come back and probably crawl up your leg to try and get your attention. It's the same stuff. It's the same process I feel that happens here with these feelings, is that the more I try and push it away, the more I try and say, like, this doesn't exist, or I don't feel that way, the more I try and avoid it, the more those emotions are like the child that is pulling on your pants. It's exactly like that, where the emotions are saying, I'm here, listen to me, I'm here. And sometimes all we need to do is just put that spotlight to say, hey, what am I feeling? And that this feeling is uncomfortable. So in a closing thought, is the opposite of imposter syndrome is not confidence, but it is self-trust. And I think we spoke about that quite nicely today. We can't just magically develop confidence. We have to start somewhere. So think about the way that you speak about yourself, speak to yourself, think about the people that you have around you, think about the environments that you're in, and think about your relationship with yourself in terms of trusting. What does that look like? Sometimes we can look at our relationships with other people and they can be fantastic and they can be trust and respect and all of that. But do you have that with yourself? Trust, respect, compassion, understanding? Sometimes no. Sometimes we don't have that. And it can be a lot to realize. So also just be gentle with yourself when you're going through this. I see we have a ton of questions in the chat, but based on our time, I think we are going to maybe address those questions afterwards, so that we can just close off here today. But I do appreciate everyone putting their comments into the chat and telling us a little bit about where you're at, what you've experienced, and what is happening. So before you leave, I just wanted to make mention of the accredited qualifications that we have at SACAP as part of our SACAP College. There are higher certificates, diplomas, degrees. There's also postgraduate studies as well. So if you're new to SACAP, if this is the first time that you are joining us, please take some time to look at some of the courses that we offer, and there may be something that can also align with you and where you're at, no matter where you're coming from. And then, for those that maybe prefer more of the distance learning, we've also got SACAP Global, where we've got courses, micro-credentials. Some of them are CPD courses as well. I've seen in the chat, we do have some maybe registered practitioners on the call. So have a look at our SACAP Global website for some of those courses and some of those webinars that are available. And then lastly, I just want to encourage you to follow us on social media, to have a look at our different pages, reach out, contact us, let's chat about some things. Even if you have some ideas for webinars, I'm sure you can chat to our team as well. But if there's anything you want to know a little bit more about, let's engage and let's see where we're at. So with that being said, I just really want to thank you for joining us, taking your lunch break for some of you, taking your lunch break to join us today. It's been beautiful. And I appreciate all of you. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you, everybody.